We're here with Jerry Gordon, a board member for American Congress for Truth. He's a former U.S. military intelligence officer, a writer, and an activist. Once again, Jerry, welcome to Rabbi Rock.
Pleasure to be here.
You had a very active summer.
Yes, I guess I did.
Tell us about it.
I was asked by a great guy, Dexter Van Zyl of the Judeo-Christian Alliance, which is part of the David Project in Boston, to work with something called the Coalition for Responsible Peace in the Middle East, and went down to Orlando, Florida to attend the Evangelical Lutheran General Assembly. This past summer, a number of general assemblies and synods, particularly for the United Church of Christ and the Disciples of Christ out in Portland, Oregon, had passed resolutions in favor of supporting divestment of public securities related to companies doing business with Israel, and in many cases sponsoring resolutions that said that Israel should, quote, tear down the wall, meaning the security barrier, which has prevented a number of terrorist actions and suicide bombings from occurring in Israel. In the case of the Evangelical Lutherans in Orlando, they also had resolutions, but were more focused on the question of, quote, the business about the security barrier.
Okay,
peace but not walls.
Let's define what divestment really means, in case someone doesn't quite realize the implications of that.
Basically, what divestment is all about is an economic boycott. That is to say that these liberal, mainly Protestant denominations who have significant endowments would look through their portfolios and select out stocks of companies that are basically either investing in or doing business with the State of Israel. Companies like Caterpillar Tractor or Motorola, as a case in point, or even our own United Technologies here in Connecticut. That's essentially, particularly what the Presbyterian Church USA had adopted in 2004 as its platform, and many of these other liberal Protestant denominations at their various meetings this year had basically adopted resolutions that were similar to that.
What's the argument? Why would they want to divest from Israel?
They want to divest from Israel because they believe that the Palestinians are suffering. And in fact, what this is an extension of is something known as replacement or witness theology in Christianity. That has become increasingly clear with groups such as the Sabeel Ecumenical Liberation Theology Center in Jerusalem, which has been on a roadshow throughout North America this fall, ending up in Toronto, Canada this past weekend, to some degree of controversy.
So they feel that the Palestinians are causing suffering to the that the Israelis are causing suffering to the Palestinians, and therefore we should not support them by buying their products, basically? Basically,
but it's worse than that. In the case of Anglican canon Naim Atik, who had founded the Sabeel organization, they have imagery of Israelis as Christ killers. There is a chap who unfortunately is a professor of Jewish studies down at Baylor University who is a member of Sabeel here in North America.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that like a murder that happened like a long time ago?
Yes, it was an official murder, if history is correct, committed by the Romans, as we recall.
So it's more than just divestment from Israel for current perceived or stated indiscretions, but it sounds like it's getting into a kind of an anti-Semitic canard.
Yes. One example of that is this professor of Jewish studies at Baylor University, Mark Ellis, who at these Sabeel conferences will have his PowerPoint roadshow segment, and he shows essentially the Shulchan Aruch, the Ark,
yes,
and there's a zoom in on the Torah, unrolled,
okay,
and out of the parchment of the Torah comes an Israeli gunship.
Oh, all right. It's like creative art.
Yes, very creative, but very anti-Semitic art by conventional standards.
Okay, now why is that anti-Semitic?
Well, it's anti-Semitic because it basically trivializes and marginalizes the Jewish faith as basically a supporter of being powerful as against what it was a long time ago, allegedly by these proponents, as being powerless. If you keep that paradigm in mind, that's essentially the message that these folks at Sabeel and other organizations want to get around to unknowing American liberal Protestants.
Would you be okay with a two-state solution?
If the Palestinians could ever settle down and create what we consider as an operating governing body and demilitarize the various, I call them jihadi militias, of course.
Okay. You say of course?
Yes.
Okay. So you recognize that these people have been there and they have rights, and you recognize that they're entitled to have a national spirit, a desire to have a state of their own?
Correct.
Okay. So we have to, what we're trying to do here, I guess, is divide the nonsense from the truth. So let's hear a little bit more about what's happening here in the United States in the divestment movement in the church.
Well, what's happening this fall in particular is that not only the Sabeel organization that I spoke about, but also the International Solidarity Movement, which has been in the forefront of conducting direct actions against Israel in the disputed territories, has a roadshow that is running around to a number of basically fairly liberal, mainly Universalist Unitarian churches all throughout America. Mm-hmm. And that roadshow is composed of basically an Israeli anarchist by the name of Yonatan or John Pollock and an ex-Fatah fighter, we're not quite sure how ex he really is, by the name of Ayad Murar. And what they're proposing is that basically they're engaged in nonviolent actions against the Israelis, primarily to convince everybody to stop the building, or the completion, I should say, of the security barrier.
Okay. You feel that the security barrier is legitimate?
It's the only bulwark that Israel had to confront the anarchy of both terrorists and suicide bombers coming into the state of Israel and killing innocent civilians, whether they're Jewish or Arab.
Has the security fence proven to be successful? Has it deterred a lot of terrorism in the areas where it is built?
Absolutely, positively. It has caused a virtually 90+% reduction in the number of these kind of terror attacks that have occurred in Israel, notwithstanding the more recent one that occurred in this Hadera open market this past week.
After the call from Ahmadinejad for armed struggle against the state of Israel, that's the president of Iran, that just a few days ago called for the genocide and destruction of the Israeli people and their state.
Yes, that basically is a call for jihad. And it came coincidentally at the tail end of Ramadan, which is usually the peak of what I would consider as Muslim or Islamic fervor that usually occurs during the month-long celebration of Ramadan.
As a former military intelligence officer, is that an act of war?
I think, as a columnist, David Warren had said in a publication called The Ottawa Citizen up in Canada, that it looks like what the international lawyers would call a casus belli, almost equivalent to what triggered the 1967 6 Days of War.
So what would be the likely scenario if there was a war in reference to Iran and their threats?